So when you have the same base and division, you're going to subtract. If I have x to the a over x to the b, I'm going to subtract those, a minus b. I'm just using variables. If you want to use numbers instead, that's great. So your reminder today is when you have the same base and division, please subtract. That's the first rule that you should technically know from your last unit. What about when you have negatives? So say it looks like this with a negative exponent. Do you remember what we do with negative exponents? Move them to the bottom or send them to their room, right? I told you that story about me and my sister. We used to fight and you get sent to your room. So if it's a negative exponent, you send it to the other side. And any empty spots get filled with a 1. So in this case, it becomes x to the positive m. So your rule and kind of synopsis, you guys said send it to the bottom, but I'm going to say in general, send to the other side. Because if it's on the bottom of a fraction, you would send it up. Send it to the other side, and then when it gets to the other side, it's going to become positive. Right? Because if you're in your room for a long time, or long enough, you eventually come around and you're like, okay, have a better attitude and become positive. Those are the 2 rules I need you to know today. Here, you'll see a couple steps for how we're dividing today. The first thing you'll do is put each term being divided by what's in the denominator. So you're going to split it up. Then you'll deal with the numbers, which we call the coefficients. You'll divide or reduce the fraction there. And then you'll deal with the exponents according to these rules. We're going to get to the first example now. So example 1, we have a polynomial on the top, multiple terms, being divided by a monomial, which is a 1 term, which in our case this time is 3. So all you're going to do is you're going to take each term and you're going to divide each term by 3, because everything here is divided by 3. Okay, so we're going to rewrite it. That's all you're doing. I take the first term, 18xy, and I divide that by 3. And I keep going. I take the second term, 22x to the third y, and I divide that by 3. And I keep going, and I do that with the last term as well. Let's do the first one. I'm going to do 18 divided by 3. What's 18 divided by 3? 6. Okay. You can use a calculator if you need to. 6. But then there's no exponents, there's no x's or y on the bottom of this fraction, so I'm just going to put 6xy. So in this case, you only ended up dealing with 18 divided by 3. You divide the coefficients, and then you kind of just smush the x and y next to it. Okay, the next term, what about 22 divided by 3? Is that going to work out evenly for us? No. Maybe you can do it. 21 divided by 3 is 7. So 22 divided by 3 would be 7 1/3, or 7.3 repeating, but I do not want you to write that down. What you need to do in problems like this is think, can I simplify this fraction? Like, can I reduce it in any way? So anything that 22 and 3 both divide by except for 1. So since 2 doesn't work and obviously 3 doesn't work, then you're going to leave this as a fraction. This is kind of strange, but you're going to leave it as 22/3 out in front, and then x to the third y goes next to it. Okay, hopefully we can do this last one. 15 divided by 3. 5, they all said. Yes, it's 5. and then x, y squared goes next to it. So you're going to divide 15 divided by 3 here, get you 5. And since there's no variables or exponents to subtract, put it next to it. This is your final answer. You will leave it like that. So on number 2, the first thing you need to do is break this up and rewrite it. So take each term and divide each term by 2x. 12x to the third divided by 2x. The middle term divided by 2x. And the last term divided by 2x. And then you do each term, part by part. First up, 12 divided by 2 is 6. So we have 6. And then this guy right here, x, what exponent does it have? It has a 1. So you are going to subtract these now. 3 minus 1 would give us x to the second power. And you keep going. Negative 6 divided by 2 will give me negative 3. And again, subtract your exponents. So I have x to what power? 1. You could put the 1 here, although if you're typing this in like Math Excel, it's not going to want you to. So I would just leave it as 3x. Okay, in the last term, you do 2 divided by 2. What is 2 divided by 2? 1. Thank you for not saying 0. It is 1. And then if you were to subtract these, we would get x to what power? 0. Okay, but here's the thing. If you write x to the 0, you guys, we should know this from last unit. What is anything to the 0 power? 1. Okay, anything to the 0 power is 1. So if you were to write this, that's just going to become a 1 anyways. This is something you need to know in math. When I have the same thing over itself, like x over x, cancels out. Or it divides to 1. That's why we say it cancels out. So it's not going to affect it anyway. We don't want to leave it as x to the 0 power. 2 divided by 2 is 1. X divided by x is 1. It's 1. Take each term and divide each term by negative 6z squared. And if you have a negative on the top, you still have to have the negative on the bottom as well. Let's do the first term. 24 divided by 6 is 4. Negative 4 in this case. And then you subtract, and we get z to what power? Second. So it's going to be z squared. All right, the middle term is where it gets kind of fun. 16 divided by 6, does that work out evenly? No, it's not going to get you a whole number. And so what you need to do is actually simplify this fraction. I'll do it out to the side. Negative 16 over negative 6. You can't leave it like that. First up, what is a negative divided by a negative? Positive. Yes, good. So our answer should be positive. But this fraction can get smaller because what can both 16 and 6 divide by? 2. So I need to divide both the top and the bottom by 2. Which means that my final answer is going to be 16 divided by 2 is 8. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. And our answers here are, when we simplify it, should be positive. So back on my expression, I put plus 8/3. let's look at this next part. You still have z squared over z squared. If I were to subtract that, what do I get? 0. 2 minus 2 is 0. I'm going to go ahead and write it down this time. Z to the 0. Technically, they would cancel out, but we'll get there in a sec. Okay, and your last term is also kind of fun. Negative 12 divided by negative 6 gets us, ooh, be careful. What's the sign going to be? Plus 2. And this is why this one's interesting. You have a 1 on the top and a 2 on the bottom. So you have to do 1 minus 2. What would that give us? So this time your exponent's a negative 1. And remember, we don't like negative exponents, nor do we like negative attitudes. So you need to fix that. So we have to actually, we're not done with this one. The first term is fine, but the second and third, we need some fixing. You guys already told me before, z, anything to the 0 power is what again? 1. So here, what you're doing really is 8/3 times 1. Because remember, we talked about when you have like z squared over z squared, it cancels out. So this is gone. It's not doing anything for us. So I'm just going to do plus 8/3. And then look back at the rule at the top if you need to, but when we have a negative exponent, what do we do with it? All right, so we are going to send this down, and it becomes 2 over, the 2 stays, z, you could do z to the first if you want, but Math Excel, if you're typing this in, it would just want z, because it's just a 1. So this all looks the same. I'll distinguish. Those are z's, and the thing on the top is a 2. That is done. That's the hardest one, I think, on this page. Break it up. You should be able to do this hopefully by yourself. Each term gets divided by 7x squared y squared. If you divide negative 14 divided by 7, you get negative 2. And now we will do our x's. We subtract, and we get x to what power? 10. Because 12 minus 2 is 10. Now if you look at your y's, 5 minus 2 is 3, so it should be y to the third. Okay, your second term, 7 divided by 7 is 1. And we talked about this a couple times now. What happens with x squared over x squared? If you subtract, you get 0. So what am I going to do? They cancel out. Same with y squared over y squared. Because you have the same thing. 7 divided by 7, I'm not going to cross those out. Like when I'm crossing them out, they're all equal to 1. That's why I'm crossing them out. We already have 1. So this is done. So it's going to be 2, negative 2, x to the 10th, y to the third, plus 1. You're going to try number 5, 6, and yes, number 7 as well. If you want to work with people at your table, that's great. But I will put the answers on the board for you to check whenever you've tried it on your own.